Hello and welcome to the 26th video in this beginner's guide to Adobe After Effects. In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate how you can use track mattes to add more dynamic masking effects in After Effects. In a previous episode, I showed you how to animate a simple mask applied to a layer to create a dynamic type composition. Now, masking in After Effects can get even more dynamic. In After Effects, we can use what are called track mattes. Now, these track mattes will often be used by designers to add more dynamic masking effects to their video sequences. So in this video, we'll be building on top of what we learned about basic masking and moving on to see how track mattes work. So in this video, we'll be covering the following topics. What is a track matte and how to track matte with type, an image, a video, and with an animated sequence. After this video, you will get a better understanding of masking and how track mattes work, so you will feel confident using track mattes in your projects. So let's get into it. So here I am in After Effects, and I have a project open here that I'm going to use to demonstrate how track mattes work. So what exactly is a track matte? Well, we learned in a previous episode that masking is a way to remove parts of a layer without any destruction, keeping the original source intact. And we learned how to do this with simple shapes and using the pen tool. Now, a track matte is basically another form of mask. Track mattes tend to offer a more dynamic and customized masking effect. And the method of applying a track matte is different to that of applying a mask. So let's take a quick look at a few examples. Now, if you have the project folder, you can open up the document I have here. With the project folder open, click into the S2 Essential Practice folder, into folder 26, Track Mattes, and open the Track Mattes After Effects file, and you'll have the same document I have open here. This is a document you can use to quickly experiment with track mattes with me in this video. Now, if you don't have the project folder and you want to follow along with this tutorial using this document I have prepared especially for you, you can download this project folder for a small fee. The download link with instructions is in the description. The download folder comes with lots of exercise documents we will be using on this course that have been carefully developed to aid your learning experience. The folder also comes with document resources such as videos, graphics, and images you can use to build your first video presentation from scratch later on in this course. To get the full learning experience, I recommend you get the project folder. Download link with instructions is in the description. So with the project folder open, click into the S2 Essential Practice folder, into folder 26, Track Mattes, and open the Track Mattes After Effects file, and you'll have the same document I have open here. So now I want to draw your attention over to the project panel. Here you can see I have a folder called Track Matte Examples, and one called Worksheets. For now, I need you to pay attention to the Track Matte Example folder. So double click on the first comp here, Masking with Type, and it will appear in the composition panel. So I'll make sure the time indicator is at the start of the timeline, and I'll press spacebar to activate preview. So what we have here is a video I took on the River Thames, but we can only see certain parts of the video playing through this type composition. Now, it may seem that this is a transparent image on top of the video, but this is actually a type track matte on top of the video. So I'll press spacebar to stop the preview, and if we look in the timeline panel, we can see we have a type layer on top. If I come and double click this, I can come into the composition panel and change the type like so. And now we can see the video through this new type. So this track matte layer is easily editable. Now, if we look down in the timeline panel, we can see that currently the visibility of the type layer is turned off. Now, if we toggle the visibility back on, we can see the type fills the shape in white. In this instance, the type layer is acting as a track matte layer, so we will need to turn this off. Now, if we carefully look on the video layer below this type layer, over on the left near the properties, we see we have this drop down here next to the blending mode options. This is the track matte option, and if we click this, we can see that currently we have a Luma matte from the River Thames type layer above. So on this layer, we have a track matte applied from the type layer above, creating this mask effect. Now, it's important to note that when we use track mattes in After Effects, they must be placed directly above the layer we wish to mask. So unlike the previous examples of masks, where they are set in the mask options for a particular layer, A track matte must exist first as its own layer, which is then applied to a layer directly below it. And I'll be demonstrating how this is done shortly. Now, back in the project panel, this time I want you to double click on masking with an image. So I'll make sure the time indicator is at the start of the timeline and I'll press spacebar to activate preview. What we have here is something similar to the previous comp, but instead of the type, we have an image layer. Now again, it may seem that this is a transparent image on top of the video, but this is actually a track matte on top of the video, creating the transparency for the background color. If we look in the timeline panel, at the bottom we have some solid layers. We have a light pink, a light blue, and a white. Currently, the light pink and the light blue has its visibility toggled off, so we can see the white in the image. Now if I come and click the eye icon to toggle back the visibility of the light blue solid layer, we can see the image has changed to blue. And if I toggle the visibility of the light pink, the image is now a light pink. So this track matte is applying the transparency to the video comp, which is giving us the versatility to have a variety of background colors. So I'll press spacebar to stop the preview, and if we look back in the timeline panel, we can see we have an image layer on top, and currently the visibility of this image layer is turned off. Now if we toggle the visibility back on, we can see a black and white image. In this instance, this image layer is acting as a track matte layer, so we will need this turned off. Notice this time that instead of the track matte layer applied to a video, it's applied to a comp layer. And if we double click on the fish video comp layer, we can see in here a video with some color effects applied, and a shape layer above with a gradient applying a multiply blending mode. So in order to create this effect here, we require two layers. So back in the masking with image comp, it's important to remember that a track matte can only work above one layer. So in this instance, we needed to pre-compose the video effect, which comprises of two layers, into one simple comp layer in order to apply the track matte directly above. Now, if we carefully look on the fish video comp layer, to the left near the properties, we can see we have another track matte layer applied. If we click this, we can see that currently we have a Luma inverted matte from the face image layer above. So on this layer, we have a track matte applied from the image layer above, creating this mask effect. So I'm going to come back to the image layer above and toggle the visibility back. So this image is a black and white image. Now it's important to note that track mattes are essentially masks, and track matte masks work much like masks in Photoshop and Illustrator. Whatever is black is hidden, and whatever is white is revealed. So when we use an image to create a track matte, the variance of black and white will create the variance in the track matte, and you will see what I mean by this in a minute. Now if I toggle this image back off and come back to the track matte that is applied to the video, if we click it, right now it's a Luma inverted track matte. But if we select the Luma matte option here above, we can invert the mask, like so. So when applying a track matte using an image like this, it's easy to invert the effect on the track matte option. Simply choose between the Luma inverted matte or the Luma matte option. Now back in the project folder, this time I want you to double click on masking with a video. So I'll make sure the time indicator is at the start of the timeline and I'll press spacebar to activate preview. What we have here is something quite different. This time we are using a video to create a track matte, and the effect here looks like a double exposure effect. So I'll press spacebar to stop the preview, and if we look at the timeline panel, this time we can see we have a video layer on the top. And just like in our previous examples, the visibility of this layer is currently turned off. Now if we toggle the visibility back on, we can see a black and white video. In this instance, the video layer is acting as a track matte layer, just like the image we saw in the previous example. So for now, we will need this turned off. Notice again that this track matte is applied to a comp layer. And if we double click on the Hyde Park Lake comp, again, we have a video with some color effects applied, with a shape layer above and a gradient applying a screen blending mode. So back in the masking with video comp, just like with our previous example, we needed to pre-compose the video effect of two layers into one simple comp layer in order to apply the track matte directly above. Now if we carefully look on the comp layer, we can see we have a track matte layer applied. If we click this, we can see that currently we have a Luma inverted matte from the video layer above. So on this layer, we have a track matte applied from the video layer above, creating this mask effect. So I'm going to come back to the video layer above and toggle the visibility back. So this is a black and white video layer, but notice this time we have a variety of grey tones. Now remember the principle of masks. Whatever is black is hidden and whatever is white is revealed. Now, if I toggle the visibility off, we can see that all these midtones create a softer opaque quality than the previous example, not quite as clean cut. Now again, we can invert the mask effect by selecting the other Luma Matte option in the Track Matte drop-down box, like so. But for now, I'll just toggle that back to the inverted option. Now with the top video selected, I'll click onto the Effects Control panel by clicking the Effects Control tab at the top of the project panel. And to this video, we can see a lot of effects we can now control, which is currently determining this Track Matte effect. Right now, we have a black and white effect, an auto levels effect, and a Gaussian blur effect applied. If I toggle these off, we can see the change that is having on the Track Matte effect. And if I toggle back the top video layer, we can see it's now color. Now to this layer, I also have a threshold effect applied that is currently turned off. Now if I was to click this to bring it back, you can see that this has created an effect with much more contrast. If we toggle this off, we can see the effect that is having. Similar to our previous effect, but a lot more clean cut. If I click the Gaussian blur back on, we can see the effect is less sharp. And if I click the auto levels and black and white, the effect changes once again. So for now, I'll turn off the threshold effect and we are back to the double exposure effect. So that is an example of where you can use a video as a track matte. Keep in mind that you can also apply lots of effects to your video track matte layer to alter the overall effect of the mask. Now back in the project panel, I want to show you one last example. So now double click on masking with animated comp. So I'll make sure the time indicator is at the start of the timeline and I'll press spacebar to activate preview. So what we have here is an animated track matte on top of a video. Now, unlike the image or video that is creating the mask effect in the previous example, here the mask effect is created by an animated comp. Here we have some video playing inside an animated sequence. So I'll press spacebar to stop the preview, and if we look in the timeline, this time we can see a composition layer at the top. Now, if we double click this composition, it will open up in a new tab. And down in the timeline panel, we can see a number of shape layers. So I'll make sure the time indicator is at the start of the timeline and I'll press spacebar to activate preview. And here we can see an animation. Here we have a number of snowflake shapes falling from the top in a variety of tones from black to grey. And if we look down in the timeline panel, we can see all the layers that have been animated previously with all the keyframes for the effects. So I'll close this tab and come back to the main composition. So this track matte is working exactly the same as the previous image and video track matte example. However, in this instance, instead of a video track matte, we are using a composition layer with an animation inside to use as a track matte. If we look on the video layer below this comp layer, we can see a Luma inverted track matte option applied. And we can invert this easily by choosing the other Luma option, like so. Easy. So those are a few common examples of how one may go about masking in After Effects using track mattes. Depending on the dynamic of the effect you want to achieve, you may either use a type track matte, an image track matte, a layer track matte, or an animated sequence as a track matte. So let's now have a go and see how we can apply track mattes to our layers. So back in the project panel, notice under the track matte examples folder, we have a practice folder. Well, in here, you should see the same comps as above, but without any of the track mattes applied. And I have put these together for you to follow along with me. So let's begin by clicking on the first comp, type track matte. So in the timeline panel, we can see three layers. From the bottom, we have a blue solid layer. On top of this, a video layer. And on top of this, a type layer. So by now, this is an easy comp you should be able to put together yourself. What we want to do here is mask the video so we can only see it inside the type. So we can see the blue solid layer behind. So on top of my video, I will need to place some white type. Now remember the principle of masking. Whatever is black is hidden and whatever is white is revealed. Now we have to make sure the type is directly above the layer we want to mask. not below or it will not work. It has to be directly above. So when I'm happy with my type on top of my video, I'll come to the video layer below and make sure I can see the track matte option drop down. If you cannot see this, make sure you have the control panel switch second from the left turned on in the bottom right corner of the interface. By clicking this, you can toggle the visibility of the blending mode and track matte switches here. Okay, so on the video layer, if I come to the track matte option, I'll click this and select Luma Matte, and notice it will state the name of the layer above. Upon click, a mask will be applied to the video layer, and the visibility of the type layer will be automatically turned off, because this is now a track matte layer. So just like that, we applied a track matte to the video layer. Pretty easy. Now remember, if you want to invert the effect, you can simply click on the track matte option and select invert. Now, once we have applied the track matte, the type is still editable. If you double click on the type layer and come into the composition panel, you can edit the type and even move it around to tweak the track matte. Easy. So that is the principle of applying track mattes to layers in After Effects. The only difference is the type of track matte layer you wish to apply. So back in the project panel, in the worksheets folder, now double click on Image Track Matte. So again, we have a solid layer at the base, a comp layer at the top, and a black and white image layer on top of this. Now, if we double click into the video comp layer in between, we can see it consists of two layers, a video layer with some effects applied, and a shape layer with a blending mode applied. So back in the image track matte comp, remember, if you want to apply a track matte to a number of layers that make a particular effect, be sure to pre-compose the layers first in order to apply the track matte. A track matte can only be applied to one layer directly below it. So if we want to apply this image layer as a track matte, first make sure it's on top of the layer you wish to mask, then into the track matte options of the layer you wish to mask. In this instance, select Luma Matte and it's applied. So back in the project panel, in the project folder, now double click on Video Track Matte. So again, we have a solid layer at the base, a comp layer on top of that, and this time a color video layer at the top of the layer stack. Now again, if we double click into the video comp layer in between, we can see it consists of two layers, a video layer with some effects applied, and a shape layer with a blending mode applied. So back in the Video Track Matte comp, just like in the last example, this has been set as a comp layer in order to apply the track matte directly above. So if we want to apply this video layer as a track matte, first make sure it's on top of the layer you wish to mask, then into the track matte option of the layer you wish to mask below it, select Luma Matte, and it's applied. Though in this instance, I'll select the Luma Invert, and now we have a nice double exposure effect. Now we can also apply some effects to the video matte in order to tweak the overall effect. So up in the Effects and Presets panel, I'll type in black. Below this, I'll drag the black and white effect onto the track matte layer. Next, I'll type Auto into the Effects and Presets panel. And below this, I'll drag the Auto Levels effect onto the track matte layer. And over in the Effects controls, I can toggle the black and white levels like so to tweak the overall effect. Next, I'll type Blur into the Effects and Presets panel. Below this, I'll drag the Gaussian blur effect onto the track matte layer, and then I can toggle the blur effect, which will tweak the overall effect. So I'll make sure the time indicator is at the start of the timeline, and I'll press spacebar to activate preview, and that is looking really nice. So I'll press spacebar to stop the preview, and now if I want to add more drastic effect, I'll type threshold into the Effects and Presets panel. Below this, I'll drag the threshold effect onto the track matte layer, and I'll toggle the threshold. Now, if we want to apply the blur to this, simply drag the blur effect in the effects controls down under the threshold effect. And here we can see a much softer effect. Now remember, we can toggle effects on and off in the effects controls by hitting the FX icon next to the effect names, should we want to further tweak the overall effect. Easy. So that is how you can use track mattes in After Effects. Remember, they can only be applied to one layer directly below them, and they work much like masks in Photoshop and Illustrator. Whatever is black is hidden, and whatever is white is revealed. So now we can move on from masking and onto a new topic. Now, over the past few episodes, we have looked at pre-comps, and how they help to group layers together to apply effects and track mattes as a whole. Now, in After Effects, there is another way we can group multiple layers and manage things like position and scale of multiple layers at once. In After Effects, we can create what is called a null object and use something that is called parenting. In the next video, I will be discussing null objects and parenting and how this works in After Effects. So see you in the next video.